Some people don't bleed because they are weak. They bleed because they chose to stand where no one else dared. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you believe dignity deserves protection no matter who wears the uniform, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, back to Alyssa Brooks. The first thing anyone noticed was not the blood. It was the silence. The grand foyer of the Kang estate had always echoed with polished shoes against imported Italian marble, the soft rustle of tailored suits, and the measured voices of people who believed wealth gave them the right to command the world. Tonight, however, every sound had vanished, swallowed by a silence so absolute that even the crystal chandelier seemed afraid to breathe. In the center of that silence lay Alyssa Brooks. Her black housekeeping uniform, once pressed with meticulous care only hours earlier, was soaked in crimson. A streak of blood ran from her temple across her cheek, disappearing beneath the white collar of her apron. One trembling hand still gripped a silver serving tray, as though letting go meant surrendering the last fragment of her duty. She never cried out, even now, even while the polished marble beneath her slowly reflected the spreading scarlet around her. The guests stared from a distance. Some covered their mouths. Others whispered behind trembling fingers. No one moved, not because they lacked compassion, because fear had entered the room before anyone realized it. 2 security guards hurried forward. "Move her. Call the cleanup team. Clear the entrance before Mr. Kang arrives." One guard reached toward Alyssa's shoulder. His fingertips were only inches away. "Don't touch her." The command exploded through the mansion like thunder striking glass. Every head turned. Every heartbeat seemed to stop. Kang stood at the top of the staircase. His tailored black suit looked untouched by the chaos surrounding him, but his face no longer carried the cold composure that had earned him a reputation throughout New York's underworld. The calm man who settled conflicts with a glance had disappeared. In his place stood someone no one inside the estate had ever seen before. His jaw was rigid, his breathing uneven. His dark eyes burned with something far more dangerous than anger. Fear. The security guards froze instantly. Neither dared move another inch. One slowly withdrew his hand from Alyssa, as though the air around her had become sacred. Ethan descended the staircase without haste, each measured step echoing across the marble floor. The room instinctively opened before him. Executives, family friends, politicians, investors, people accustomed to commanding respect wherever they went, lowered their eyes as he passed. He ignored every one of them. His attention never left the woman lying on the floor. When he finally reached her, he dropped to one knee. The movement alone stunned everyone. Men like Kang did not kneel. Not for rivals. Not for allies. Not for anyone. Yet there he was, expensive trousers against blood-stained marble, reaching toward the trembling woman everyone else had dismissed as nothing more than another maid. Alyssa. Her name escaped his lips almost as a whisper. No title, no distance, only concern. Her eyelids fluttered. She tried to speak. Instead, another thin stream of blood slipped from the corner of her mouth. Ethan's expression hardened. Whoever had done this had crossed a line no negotiation could erase. His fingers hovered carefully near her face, refusing to touch the wound until the physician arrived, as though afraid even the gentlest contact might cause her more pain. For the first time in years, his hands trembled. The head physician rushed into the foyer carrying an emergency medical case, but Ethan lifted one hand without looking away from Alyssa. "No one touches her until you tell me exactly how to move her." The doctor nodded immediately. Even he understood. This was no longer simply an injured employee. Something inside the mansion had shifted. Across the room, several faces quietly lost their color, because they finally understood what they had failed to see for months. The invisible woman they had mocked, ordered around, and spoken over, had somehow become the only person capable of making the most feared Korean Mafia boss forget the entire world around him. And no one yet knew the terrible reason she was lying in his arms, covered in blood. 3 months earlier, before blood stained the marble floors of the Kang estate, Alyssa Brooks had been exactly what powerful people preferred not to notice. Invisible. The employment agency had warned her twice before she signed the contract. The salary is generous. The rules are strict. And the owner. The recruiter hesitated, lowering her voice. "You don't ask questions about Kang." Alyssa simply smiled. I've never had the luxury of asking questions. That answer earned a quiet nod. An hour later, a black luxury sedan carried her through towering iron gates that separated Ethan Kang's private estate from the rest of Manhattan. Beyond them stood a mansion carved from limestone and glass, surrounded by immaculate gardens that looked less like nature and more like something carefully negotiated into perfection. Everything about the estate spoke the language of control. The fountains flowed with mathematical precision. The hedges stood perfectly symmetrical. Even the security guards seemed to breathe on command. Alyssa tightened her grip around the worn leather bag resting on her lap. Inside it were only two uniforms, a faded family photograph, and the last handwritten prescription for her mother's heart medication. Nothing else remained of the life she had left behind. Mrs. Hahn, the estate's head housekeeper, greeted her at the servants' entrance with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades ensuring the mansion never fell out of rhythm. No elevators reserved for the family. No conversations unless spoken to. No eye contact during business meetings. And above all, she stopped walking. If Mr. Kang enters a room, you become part of the furniture. Alyssa nodded politely. I understand. Mrs. Hahn studied her for another second. Most new employees arrived intimidated. Others arrived fascinated by rumors surrounding the Korean Mafia Boss who owned half the city's luxury hotels, shipping companies, and financial firms. This young woman seemed neither frightened nor curious. Only tired. That, somehow, worried Mrs. Hahn more. The servants' quarters buzzed quietly as introductions began. Some welcomed Alyssa with cautious smiles. Others barely looked at her. Near the laundry room, two maids whispered just loudly enough for her to hear. She won't last. They never do. The boss replaces staff faster than flowers. Alyssa pretended not to notice. She had learned years ago that silence often protected dignity better than arguments ever could. Her first assignment was simple. Prepare the East Wing before that evening's private dinner. Dust every surface. Polish every window. Replace every fresh flower arrangement. Leave no evidence that another human being had ever been there. She worked with calm precision. Each movement carried quiet purpose rather than speed. She straightened paintings whose frames leaned less than an inch. Folded hand towels into perfect symmetry. Picked up a tiny toy car abandoned beneath a leather sofa and placed it carefully on a nearby shelf instead of throwing it away. Small details. Small kindnesses. No one noticed. Or so she believed. From the second-floor balcony, Ethan Kang watched without announcing his presence. He had returned from a meeting nearly 30 minutes earlier and had expected another nervous employee constantly glancing toward the security cameras or admiring expensive furniture. Instead, he found a young black maid humming softly while cleaning a room no guest would ever enter. There was nothing remarkable about her appearance. Her uniform was plain. Her shoes showed signs of careful repair. Her hair was tied neatly beneath a simple scarf. Yet she moved through the mansion with an unusual gentleness, treating every object and every person as though each deserved respect regardless of value. When she noticed one of the elderly gardeners struggling to lift a heavy crate through the courtyard window, she quietly disappeared. Moments later, she returned carrying half the weight herself. No announcement. No request for recognition. No expectation of gratitude. The old gardener smiled. She smiled back, then continued working as if nothing had happened. Ethan remained perfectly still. Most people became generous only when someone powerful was watching. This woman had looked around before helping. Not to see who might reward her, but to make sure no one saw the old man needing assistance. For reasons he could not explain, Ethan found himself watching longer than he intended. Only when his chief of security entered the study did he finally step away from the balcony. Sir, tonight's guests will arrive at 7. Ethan gave a brief nod. Yet as he walked toward his office, one unexpected thought lingered behind him like the fading echo of a distant melody. For the first time in years, someone inside his mansion had managed to attract his attention without saying a single word. People rarely reveal who they truly are when life is easy. They reveal themselves when they discover someone beneath them. Within a week, everyone in the Kang estate knew Alyssa Brooks by name. Not because she demanded attention, because she had become the easiest target. The mansion woke before sunrise every morning. By 5 o'clock, the kitchens glowed with warm light. Coffee filled the air, and dozens of employees moved through the corridors with quiet precision. Every minute had been scheduled long before dawn, every responsibility assigned with military discipline. Alyssa arrived before almost everyone else. She believed that beginning early gave her something more valuable than time. It gave her peace. She polished silver before breakfast, arranged fresh lilies in the East Gallery, and checked every guest room twice before anyone requested it. She never hurried, yet somehow she was always finished first. Some admired her work. Others resented it. Among them was Victoria Hale, the estate's event director. Elegant, ambitious, and obsessed with appearances, Victoria viewed every employee as a reflection of her own reputation. Perfection mattered to her more than people, especially servants. One afternoon, while preparing the ballroom for a private charity gala, Victoria walked slowly between rows of polished tables, inspecting every detail. Her high heels stopped beside Alyssa. She stared at a tiny fingerprint left on the edge of a crystal wine glass. "Did you clean this?" "Yes, ma'am." Victoria lifted the glass into the sunlight. "It doesn't look clean." "I'm sorry. I'll polish it again." Victoria smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. If you have time to apologize, you have time to do your job correctly. Without warning, she dropped the expensive crystal onto the marble floor. It shattered into dozens of glittering pieces. Several employees jumped. Victoria looked directly at Alyssa. "Now clean your mistake." No one said a word. Everyone had seen what happened. Everyone knew the glass had been spotless. Alyssa simply bent down, one piece at a time. Not because she accepted the accusation, because arguing would only create another spectacle. Across the room, the catering staff exchanged uneasy glances. One whispered, "She didn't break it." Another quietly answered, "That doesn't matter." The silence that followed hurt more than the humiliation itself. Later that evening, another test arrived. A famous businessman accidentally spilled red wine across an imported Persian rug worth more than Alyssa would earn in several years. Before anyone could react, Victoria pointed toward her. "Why weren't you watching?" Alyssa looked down at the spreading stain. "I was serving the guests. You should have prevented it." "I understand." "No," Victoria replied coldly. "You clearly don't." She handed Alyssa a scrubbing brush. "You're staying until it's gone." Several guests overheard the conversation. One laughed softly. "These agencies really hire anyone these days." Another glanced toward Alyssa and shrugged. "She's just the maid." The words floated through the room as casually as background music. Just the maid. No title could have sounded smaller. Alyssa lowered her eyes, not in shame, but in discipline. She had promised herself years ago that poverty would never teach her bitterness. Her dignity belonged to her, no one else. Hours passed. The guests enjoyed expensive wine. Music echoed through the ballroom. Laughter filled every corner. Meanwhile, Alyssa remained kneeling beside the rug, carefully removing each stain by hand beneath the glow of golden chandeliers. Few noticed. One person did. Standing in the shadow of the upper balcony, Kang watched the ballroom below through floor-to-ceiling glass. He had witnessed the entire exchange. His security advisor stepped beside him. "Should I replace the event director?" Ethan's expression remained unreadable. "No." The answer surprised the advisor. Ethan continued watching. "Not yet." His voice was calm, almost distant. The truth about people always reveals itself when they think no one important is looking. Below, Victoria accepted compliments from influential guests, smiling as though nothing unpleasant had occurred. Alyssa quietly finished cleaning the rug, returned every chair to its exact position, and disappeared into the service hallway without expecting thanks from anyone. She never realized that Ethan's eyes followed her until the heavy kitchen door closed behind her. Nor did she know that someone else had been watching from the opposite side of the ballroom. A woman wearing a diamond engagement ring tightened her grip around a champagne glass. Sophia Loren. The woman expected to become Mrs. Ethan Kang. She had noticed something that disturbed her far more than a housemaid's existence. For the first time since their engagement began, Ethan Kang had spent an entire evening watching another woman. Kindness has a strange habit of leaving fingerprints where pride leaves only scars. The days settled into a rhythm that never changed. Luxury dinners, private meetings, motorcades arriving beneath the estate's stone archway, crystal glasses polished until they disappeared beneath the light. The mansion functioned like an expensive clock, every employee expected to perform with flawless precision. Yet hidden behind its polished walls were lives no guest ever noticed. An aging gardener whose arthritis worsened every winter. A dishwasher working 2 jobs to pay his daughter's college tuition. A young kitchen assistant who secretly slept in the pantry because he could no longer afford rent. They were invisible, just as Alyssa had once been. One rainy morning, the elderly gardener, Mr. Alvarez, struggled to carry sacks of fresh soil across the courtyard. The younger workers hurried past him, each afraid of arriving late to their own assignments. No one stopped. No one except Alyssa. She quietly picked up 2 of the heavy bags before he could protest. "You'll hurt your back," he said. She smiled. "My back heals faster than yours." Together they finished the work before sunrise painted the gardens gold. Mr. Alvarez reached into his pocket and offered her a folded $20 bill. She gently pushed his hand away. "You'll need it more than I do." She walked away before he could thank her. By lunchtime, everyone else had forgotten the moment. Mr. Alvarez never did. A few days later, the head chef exploded inside the kitchen. "Who ruined today's soup?" No one answered. The young dishwasher stood frozen, his hands trembling so violently that one ceramic plate slipped from his fingers and shattered against the floor. Silence. The chef marched toward him. "Do you know how much this service costs?" The boy lowered his head. "I'm sorry." Before another word could be spoken, Alyssa stepped forward. "I distracted him." The statement wasn't true. The chef frowned. "Then you'll both stay after midnight." She simply nodded. That evening, while everyone else returned home, Alyssa remained beside the young dishwasher, helping him wash hundreds of dishes beneath steaming water until long after the mansion had fallen asleep. When they finally finished, the exhausted teenager whispered, "Why did you lie for me?" She handed him a clean towel. "Because one mistake shouldn't decide someone's future." He stared at her, unable to answer. Those words stayed with him far longer than the punishment itself. Acts like these multiplied quietly. A missing lunch appeared beside an employee who had skipped meals for days. A torn uniform was carefully stitched overnight without anyone claiming credit. Fresh flowers mysteriously appeared beside the portrait of a maid whose husband had recently passed away. No speeches, no announcements, no expectation of recognition. Only small acts of compassion that traveled through the servants' quarters like whispers no one could trace back to their source. The employees began noticing something unusual. Whenever someone was struggling, Alyssa somehow arrived first. One evening, Ethan crossed the west corridor on his way to a private meeting. He heard soft laughter coming from the servants' dining room. Normally, the room remained nearly silent. Curious, he paused outside the partially opened door. Inside, Alyssa sat beside 3 exhausted employees sharing homemade cornbread she had baked after finishing her own shift. The elderly gardener laughed for what seemed like the first time in weeks. The young dishwasher proudly spoke about his first college acceptance letter. Even the quiet laundry supervisor smiled. Alyssa listened more than she spoke. She made everyone around her feel seen. Ethan remained motionless. No one inside the room realized he was there. That mattered. People behaved differently when they knew power was watching. This was who she truly was. His chief of security approached from behind. "Sir." Ethan raised one finger without taking his eyes off the room. "How long has she been doing this?" The man glanced inside before answering. "From what I've gathered, since her first week." And nobody reported it. There was nothing to report. Ethan looked at Alyssa again. "No," he murmured almost to himself. There was everything to report. He turned and continued walking toward his meeting. But something inside him had shifted. For years he had measured loyalty through contracts, obedience, and fear. Yet this woman possessed something none of his wealth could purchase. People trusted her, not because they had to, because they wanted to. Far down the corridor, hidden behind an ornate marble column, Sophia Loren watched Ethan disappear into the darkness. Then she slowly turned her eyes toward the servants' dining room. She didn't see a maid sharing bread. She saw the first person who had quietly accomplished what no rival, politician, or enemy had ever managed to do. Someone had begun changing Ethan Kang, and Sophia had no intention of allowing that change to continue. Envy rarely announces itself with anger. It arrives wearing a smile, waiting patiently for the perfect opportunity. Sophia Loren had spent 2 years learning every habit Ethan Kang possessed. She knew how he preferred his coffee. She knew which politicians he trusted. She knew when silence meant approval and when it meant someone had already sealed their fate. Yet one thing she had never seen before unsettled her more than any rival organization or dangerous negotiation. Ethan had begun noticing people, not investors, not powerful allies, not influential guests. People. It started with small questions. Has the gardener received medical treatment? Who approved the kitchen renovations? Why is the night staff working overtime every weekend? The executives assumed he was reviewing operating costs. Only Sophia understood the truth. Every answer somehow led back to the same person. Alyssa Brooks. One afternoon, Sophia entered Ethan's private office without knocking, carrying a folder of charity proposals. He signed the first few pages absent-mindedly. His attention drifted toward the large window overlooking the courtyard. Sophia followed his gaze. Below, Alyssa was helping one of the delivery drivers gather groceries that had spilled across the pavement after a broken cartwheel collapsed. The driver repeatedly apologized. Alyssa only laughed softly and continued picking up oranges rolling across the stone path. Ethan watched quietly. Sophia closed the folder. You've been distracted lately. Ethan finally looked at her. I've been observant. She smiled politely. About your maid? The room became still. Ethan answered without irritation. About my employees. There is a difference. There should be. Those 3 words echoed inside Sophia's mind long after she left the office. There should be. Something was changing, and she hated changes she could not control. That evening she invited Victoria Hale to dinner in the estate's private lounge. Neither woman trusted the other, but ambition often forms temporary alliances. Victoria sipped her wine. I assume this isn't a social invitation. Sophia smiled. I simply have a question. Victoria waited. What do you know about Alyssa Brooks? Victoria rolled her eyes. The maid. The same one. Victoria laughed quietly. Too polite. Too quiet. The staff adores her. She leaned closer. And apparently, so does Ethan. Sophia's fingers tightened around her crystal glass. I need that to stop. Victoria understood immediately. Not because Sophia explained. Because women competing for influence recognized each other without words. Over the following days, subtle changes appeared throughout the estate. Cleaning schedules were mysteriously rearranged, so Alyssa always received the heaviest assignments. Fresh deliveries somehow arrived only after her shift ended. Her supplies occasionally disappeared without explanation. When mistakes occurred, someone always managed to mention her name first. Nothing severe enough to attract Ethan's attention. Only enough to wear someone down. 1,000 invisible cuts. Yet Alyssa never complained. When another maid whispered, "They're trying to make you quit," Alyssa simply folded another stack of linens. Maybe they're having difficult days. The maid stared at her. You actually believe that? Alyssa smiled faintly. No, I just don't want bitterness deciding who I become. Those words spread quietly through the servants' quarters. Even employees who barely knew her found themselves defending her when gossip began. Sophia noticed. Victoria noticed. Both women grew increasingly frustrated. One evening, Victoria entered the security office carrying a maintenance report. She stopped beside a wall filled with surveillance monitors. One screen showed Alyssa alone in the west storage room, carefully organizing expensive antique decorations. Victoria watched silently. Then she smiled. Not because she had discovered evidence, because she had discovered opportunity. What happens, she asked one of the guards casually, if something valuable goes missing? The guard shrugged. Internal investigation. And whoever handled it last? They're questioned first. Victoria nodded thoughtfully before leaving. She never looked back. Outside, rain clouds slowly gathered over the city. Inside the mansion, preparations for Ethan Kang's annual private foundation gala had already begun. Collectors would arrive carrying priceless artwork. Business leaders would display rare jewelry. Political figures would mingle beneath crystal chandeliers worth millions. The estate had never held more valuables under one roof. And somewhere within the quiet halls of that magnificent mansion, someone had just decided exactly who would be blamed when one of them disappeared. The cruelest traps are never built with ropes. They are built with certainty that no one will believe the innocent. The annual Kang Foundation Gala transformed the estate into something almost unreal. Hundreds of candles reflected against polished marble. A string quartet filled the grand hall with soft classical music. Collectors displayed paintings insured for millions of dollars. Rare jewelry glittered beneath custom-built glass, cases guarded by armed security. Every guest represented power. Every smile concealed negotiation. Every handshake carried a hidden price. For the household staff, the night meant 18 straight hours without rest. Alyssa moved quietly from room to room, making certain every tray was replaced before anyone noticed it was empty. She adjusted flowers, refilled crystal glasses, guided elderly guests toward elevators. As always, she remained almost invisible. Shortly before 9 o'clock, Victoria approached her carrying a small velvet case. There has been a change. Alyssa looked up. This necklace belongs to one of our donors. Inside the case rested an antique diamond necklace whose brilliance caught every beam of light. The security team is occupied. Take this to the West exhibition room. Alyssa hesitated. Shouldn't someone from security accompany it? Victoria's smile remained perfectly composed. It will only take 2 minutes. She placed the velvet case into Alyssa's hands before walking away. For reasons she couldn't explain, Alyssa felt uneasy. Still, refusing a direct instruction had never been an option. She crossed the long western corridor alone. The mansion seemed strangely quiet away from the music. Even the air felt heavier. When she reached the exhibition room, she stopped. The display pedestal was empty. No security guards. No curator. No donor waiting. Only silence. She looked around. Hello. No answer. Alyssa carefully placed the velvet case on the marble table beside the entrance. Perhaps she had misunderstood the instructions. As she turned to leave, every light inside the room suddenly went dark. The blackout lasted barely 3 seconds, long enough to steal certainty. When the emergency lights flickered back to life, footsteps echoed rapidly outside. Then voices. Loud. Urgent. There. Someone's inside. 3 security guards rushed through the doorway with weapons drawn. Behind them came Victoria and Sophia. The velvet case remained on the table, but it was empty. The necklace had vanished. No one spoke. The silence felt colder than the marble beneath their feet. Victoria slowly looked from the empty case to Alyssa. What happened? I don't know. You were the last person assigned to transport it. I brought it exactly as you instructed. The necklace. It was inside. Victoria walked toward the empty box. Apparently not. Within minutes, senior security officers sealed the corridor. Guests continued enjoying the gala upstairs, unaware that an internal investigation had already begun below. Every employee working that wing was assembled. One by one, their belongings were searched. Nothing. Then a female security officer approached Alyssa. May I inspect your apron pocket? Alyssa nodded immediately. She had nothing to hide. The officer reached inside. Her expression changed. Slowly, she withdrew the missing diamond necklace. The room froze. Even Alyssa stopped breathing. Her eyes widened in complete disbelief. No. She instinctively stepped backward. That's impossible. Victoria folded her arms. So that's where it went. Several employees gasped. One kitchen assistant whispered, "She would never." Another lowered his head, too frightened to speak. Alyssa stared at the necklace lying in the officer's gloved hand. I didn't put that there. No one answered. Facts appeared stronger than words. Sophia sighed softly, almost sympathetically. What a tragedy. The phrase sounded compassionate. It wasn't. Within seconds, whispers spread through the gathered staff. I knew something was wrong. Nobody is that perfect. Maybe we judged her too kindly. Each sentence struck harder than the last. Not because strangers doubted her. Because people she had quietly helped now questioned everything they thought they knew. Alyssa felt something inside her chest break. Not her reputation. Her faith. She looked around the room, searching desperately for one familiar face. Ethan. He wasn't there. He was still upstairs meeting international investors, completely unaware that the one person who had quietly restored humanity inside his home now stood surrounded by suspicion. The chief of security stepped forward. I'm placing you under temporary detention until Mr. Kang reviews the evidence. 2 guards approached. Alyssa did not resist. She only whispered the same sentence over and over, more to herself than anyone else. I didn't do it. I didn't. As one guard reached for her arm, another suddenly spoke into his earpiece. His expression changed instantly. He looked toward the hallway, then toward the grand staircase. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. Mr. Kang just received the report. The room fell completely silent. Because everyone inside the mansion knew one thing. There were many crimes Ethan Kang could forgive, but stealing from his own house had never been one of them. Truth has a heartbeat of its own. It may be buried beneath lies, but sooner or later, it begins to pulse loud enough for someone to hear. The news reached Ethan Kang before the guards escorted Alyssa out of the exhibition wing. He listened without interrupting. The necklace was recovered from her apron pocket. The evidence appears conclusive. The staff witnessed everything. His advisors expected immediate judgment. Instead, Ethan asked only one question. Who searched her? The chief of security blinked. Officer Min. And who assigned her to transport the necklace? A brief silence followed. Miss Victoria Hale. Ethan slowly stood from the conference table. Every executive inside the room rose instinctively. Not because protocol required it, because they recognized the expression on his face. It was the same expression he wore before dismantling criminal organizations that believed they had planned the perfect crime. Cold, patient, dangerously quiet. Cancel the remainder of my meetings. Within minutes, he entered the security control room hidden beneath the West Wing. Hundreds of surveillance monitors covered an entire wall. Every hallway, every entrance, every gallery. Nothing inside the Kang estate escaped the cameras. The head technician hurried forward. Sir, we've already archived the footage. I don't want the archive. Ethan's voice remained calm. I want the truth. The technician immediately rewound the recordings from the West Corridor. The first angle showed Alyssa receiving the velvet case from Victoria. Nothing unusual. The second camera followed her through the corridor. Still nothing. Then they reached the recording outside the exhibition room. Alyssa entered carrying the sealed case. 3 seconds later, the lights failed. The room went black. When the emergency lighting returned, the camera resumed recording. Alyssa stood exactly where she had been. Confused. Alone. Ethan leaned slightly closer. Freeze. The technician paused the video. What time was the blackout? 3.4 seconds. Ethan's eyes never left the frozen frame. Show me every camera connected to the emergency electrical system. The technician quickly complied. Another hallway appeared. Then another. Then a service corridor behind the exhibition room. A narrow passage rarely used by guests. The recording continued. During the exact 3-second blackout, a maintenance door opened. A figure wearing staff clothing stepped inside. The image was partially obscured. Face hidden beneath a service cap. One gloved hand held something that reflected the emergency lights. A necklace. The figure disappeared again before the lights returned. The technician swallowed hard. I didn't notice that. Ethan didn't answer. Enhance. The image sharpened. Not enough to identify the face, but enough to reveal one unmistakable detail. A bracelet. A distinctive gold bracelet with an emerald clasp. Ethan had seen it countless times. Sophia had given the same limited edition bracelet as gifts to only a handful of senior estate managers during last Christmas's staff ceremony. He turned slowly. List every employee who received that bracelet. Within seconds, 6 names appeared on the monitor. Victoria Hale, for department supervisors, and Sophia Loran herself. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Before anyone spoke, another security officer entered carrying a tablet. Sir, there may be something else. He played footage from a camera overlooking the servants' hallway. The recording showed Alyssa waiting quietly while Officer Min searched her apron. Just before reaching into the pocket, Officer Min's body briefly blocked the camera. Less than 1 second. When he moved aside, the necklace appeared. Ethan replayed the sequence 5 times. Then 6. Each replay revealed the same detail. Officer Min's right hand entered the pocket already closed. As if holding something, the room fell into absolute silence. The chief of security slowly removed his glasses. My God, Ethan looked at him. Bring Officer Min and Victoria Hale. No one leaves this estate. Outside, rain pounded against the mansion windows. Inside, panic spread through the security department. Officers who had believed the investigation was finished suddenly realized it had only begun. Meanwhile, unaware that the evidence was already unraveling, Alyssa sat alone inside a small security holding room. She stared quietly at her trembling hands. Not praying for rescue. Not hoping someone powerful would save her. She was grieving something far more painful. The belief that doing the right thing would always be enough. Several floors above, Sophia stood before a mirror adjusting a diamond earring. Her reflection smiled. She believed the danger had passed. She believed Ethan would soon forget a servant. She believed the necklace had buried the truth forever. She never realized that the most dangerous man in the room was not the one who shouted. It was the one who became completely silent. Because Ethan Kang had stopped investigating a stolen necklace. He had begun hunting the people who tried to frame the only employee he had never once caught lying. Justice rarely raises its voice. It simply asks everyone to remain in the room until the truth finishes speaking. The grand ballroom was still glowing beneath crystal chandeliers when Ethan Kang gave his next order. Lock every entrance. No one argued. Within seconds, security officers quietly sealed every exit to the estate. The orchestra stopped playing. Conversations faded into uneasy whispers. Hundreds of distinguished guests looked toward the marble staircase as Ethan descended with the calm certainty of a man who already knew the outcome. Victoria stood perfectly still. Sophia maintained an elegant smile. Officer Min tried not to meet anyone's eyes. Only Alyssa remained absent. She was still alone inside the holding room beneath the west wing. Ethan reached the center of the ballroom. His voice was steady. There has been a misunderstanding. The words echoed through the silent hall. Several guests exchanged confused glances. Victoria stepped forward with practiced confidence. The necklace has already been recovered, Mr. Kang. I know. And the employee responsible has been detained. I know that as well. His eyes settled on her. And that is precisely the problem. Without another word, the enormous LED screen normally reserved for charity presentations illuminated behind him. Security footage appeared. The first recording showed Victoria handing Alyssa the velvet case. Then the corridor. Then the sudden blackout. The ballroom watched in complete silence. The hidden service hallway appeared next. The shadowed figure entered during the 3-second darkness. Frame by frame. Slower. Closer. The emerald bracelet flashed beneath the emergency lights. Gasps rippled across the room. Victoria instinctively covered her wrist. Too late. Ethan spoke without looking at her. Interesting coincidence. No one moved. The second recording began. Officer Min searching Alyssa's apron. Normal speed. Then slowed to 1/4 speed. His right hand disappeared behind his body for a fraction of a second. When it emerged, the necklace was already concealed inside his fist. Several guests leaned forward. The room became so quiet that the hum of the projector could be heard. Officer Min's face drained of color. You may explain. Ethan's voice carried no anger. Only certainty. Officer Min looked toward Victoria. Victoria looked toward Sophia. The silence between them revealed more than words ever could. Ethan noticed. So, he folded his hands behind his back. You were looking for help. Officer Min's composure collapsed first. I never wanted to hurt her. His knees struck the marble floor. Miss Hale said no one would question it. Victoria's head snapped toward him. You liar. You promised I'd only transfer the necklace. You said she'd be dismissed. You never said Mr. Kang would review the footage himself. The ballroom erupted into horrified whispers. Victoria took one desperate step backward. This is absurd. I've done nothing. Ethan raised one finger. Another recording appeared. A private corridor. Earlier that afternoon. Victoria meeting Officer Min. She handed him a small envelope. Money. No audio was needed. Everyone understood. Victoria's confidence vanished. For the first time all evening. Fear reached her eyes. Sophia remained motionless. Almost invisible. Almost safe. Then Ethan turned toward her. There is one question left. Every guest followed his gaze. Sophia met his eyes with remarkable composure. Are you accusing me? No. He paused. I'm asking why your bracelet was present where the crime began. Sophia answered immediately. I gave several identical bracelets to senior staff. I remember. Ethan nodded. That was generous. He walked slowly toward her. So I reviewed another camera. The ballroom seemed to stop breathing. A final recording filled the screen. Sophia entering Victoria's office the night before the gala. Neither woman realized the exterior security camera overlooked the window. The footage showed them studying the exhibition floor plans together. Then Victoria removed the emerald bracelet from Sophia's wrist. They laughed. The screen went black. No dramatic confession followed. None was necessary. Sophia closed her eyes. Only for a moment. When she opened them again, she understood the game had ended. You chose a maid. She whispered. Ethan answered just as quietly. No, I chose the truth. The words struck harder than any shouted accusation. Security officers stepped forward. Victoria's shoulders collapsed. Officer Min offered no resistance. Sophia stood perfectly straight until the handcuffs touched her wrists. Only then did the illusion of control disappear. Meanwhile, beneath the mansion, another security officer hurried into the holding room. He unlocked Alyssa's door. She looked up slowly. "Miss Brooks." His voice trembled with embarrassment. "Mr. Kang requests your presence." She hesitated. "I thought I was dismissed." The officer lowered his head. "No." A long silence filled the room. Then he spoke the sentence every person inside the estate wished they had said sooner. "We were wrong." Minutes later, Alyssa entered the ballroom. The same room where powerful people had silently accepted her humiliation. Now every conversation stopped. Every guest turned. Every employee lowered their eyes. No applause. No music. Only silence. Because sometimes silence is the loudest apology a room full of guilty people can offer. And Ethan Kang took one step forward to meet the woman everyone else had failed. Power can command obedience. Wealth can purchase silence. Fear can force respect. But only character can leave behind a legacy. No newspaper ever published what happened inside Ethan Kang's estate that night. The official report described it as an internal security incident. The gala resumed. The guests departed. The marble floors were polished until every trace of chaos disappeared. By sunrise, it was as though nothing had happened. Except everyone who had witnessed it knew they would never forget. Victoria Hale disappeared from every board of directors she once proudly served. Officer Min accepted full responsibility before the authorities. Sophia Loren quietly ended her engagement without another public appearance. She left the estate carrying only a single suitcase. She never asked Ethan for forgiveness. She already understood there were some betrayals too expensive to repay. The mansion itself became strangely different. Not because of new rules. Because people had changed. Servants who once walked past Alyssa without acknowledging her now greeted her every morning. Kitchen staff no longer laughed when she entered the room. The young dishwasher she had protected months before proudly introduced himself whenever new employees arrived. "This is Miss Brooks. She saved my job." Mr. Alvarez continued bringing fresh flowers from the garden. Only now he placed them outside her room instead of hiding them beside the laundry entrance. Mrs. Han quietly removed Alyssa's name from the ordinary staff schedule. When Alyssa noticed, she approached her. "I think there's been a mistake." Mrs. Han smiled for the first time in years. "No. There has finally been a correction." Several days later, Ethan requested that Alyssa join him in the library. She entered cautiously. The same room where she had once stood silently dusting books no one noticed. Now Ethan was waiting. Not behind his enormous desk, but beside the fireplace. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside rested a simple silver nameplate. Not expensive, not decorated, only engraved with a single line. "Director of Household Operations." Alyssa looked at him in disbelief. "I don't think I'm qualified." Ethan answered immediately. "I disagree. I've never managed people." "You already have." She looked confused. He walked toward the tall window overlooking the estate. "When you arrived, my employees obeyed because they feared consequences." He turned back toward her. "Today they help one another even when no one is watching. That wasn't my doing. It was. You simply never realized you were leading." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Morning sunlight filtered through the windows, warming the polished wooden floor. Finally, Alyssa smiled. The same quiet smile she had carried through every insult, every accusation, every lonely evening. "I'll accept, but only if I can keep wearing the same uniform." Ethan almost laughed. "You've just been promoted." "I know." She gently closed the wooden box. "I don't ever want someone cleaning these halls to think they're invisible." Months passed. The estate slowly became known for something unusual. Employees stayed. Families recommended relatives to work there. Turnover disappeared. Visitors often commented on the atmosphere. No one could explain why a mansion owned by one of the country's most feared men somehow felt peaceful. The answer was never written in any company handbook. It lived in countless quiet moments. A supervisor helping a cleaner finish early. A gardener eating lunch beside executives without embarrassment. A young employee receiving a second chance after making a mistake. Small acts. Invisible acts. The kind Alyssa had practiced long before anyone noticed. One autumn afternoon, Ethan stood alone on the balcony overlooking the courtyard. Below, new employees gathered for orientation. Alyssa welcomed each one personally. She shook every hand, learned every name, made certain no one stood alone. The chief of security stepped beside Ethan. "I've worked for powerful men my entire life." He paused. "I've never seen anyone change an organization without raising their voice." Ethan watched Alyssa laughing with a frightened young housekeeper who reminded her of herself. Then he answered softly, "Neither had I." The wind carried the sound of distant laughter across the gardens. For the first time in many years, the mansion no longer felt like a fortress built to protect power. It felt like a home built to protect people. And on the front entrance, where every employee and every guest passed before stepping inside, a new bronze plaque had quietly been installed. It contained only 7 words. "In this house, every person has dignity." Most visitors barely noticed it. Those who did never forgot it. And that day, the world remembered what dignity looks like.